It's another episode of Fridays with Freddie. Fred, we're continuing what feels like a mini series here on this topic of preparing the IT shop, preparing any functional department for a change ahead. But we kind of tend to focus on the IT shop and use them as kind of the case study example. So the scenario here I want to talk you through, or have you talk us through, is we're coming out of a plateau. Things have been going status quo for a while in my department. We've been doing a good job. We keep the lights on. But, if I look back on my calendar for the last week, month, year, it's pretty much the same repeating meetings, the same stuff going on. Semester to semester, we're doing about the same things, give or take. There's been some incremental improvement in a few different areas, but nothing major. And that's good. It's served us well so far. There's been no major mandate telling us we have to change. But there's a sense, you as the leader, in this case the CIO, are getting like, there's a little voice inside you going, you know what? There's some opportunity here. There's a window here. I sense something's going to change. Maybe there's a search going on for a new president, or the president's working on a new strategic plan and they've dropped hints that there's going to be some big things coming. And this leader is thinking, I have a feeling I got to get my running shoes on, so to speak, right? So if you've got I got to put my running shoes on, something's about to happen here. Talk us through it. How do I go about preparing, especially for years? It's been kind of status quo, block and tackle stuff going on.
So for me, this transformation is more personal transformation, believe it or not, than actually IT shop transformation. Because existing CIO that has existing relationships, that has an existing reputation, for that person to make a shift is not only hard for the individual, him or herself, but also for the organization. Because like Joe, I know Joe. Joe's predictable. Joe is stable, and and I don't want Joe to come to me now and says we need to do everything different. So I think that's the main thing, that my main message is: don't go about it that way. So I think there's 5 mind shifts that we need to take a look at. I think the first one is a CIO in this position needs to start thinking like a futurist and an entrepreneur. Right? So think like a futurist and act like an entrepreneur. So what does that look like?
Okay.
So a futurist starts to look at, hey, what are the 4 or 5 scenarios that I think might come to fruition or not? The point of this is to go through this exercise and, we know AI is coming. We know societal appetite for higher education. The cost of higher education is becoming somewhat of a hurdle. At the same time, change is accelerating, so people need to be upskilled and, have questions about the curriculum, and the curriculum needs to change. Maybe 4 years is not the way we need to go. Maybe it's supposed to be 2 years or 3 years, etc. So start working through those scenarios and then start thinking, well, what would my role be in that? If the university goes into this direction, how can I enable that? I think that's number one. The entrepreneurial side is, it's not just about talking about things or thinking through things. I think that's a very, very important part. But what are small projects that I can start running, right, in-house to start experimenting with these ideas? Now, so that's number one. I think number one is start thinking like a futurist, but act like an entrepreneur. Number two, which is very important. Number two is use storytelling and a vision to move the organization forward, to move yourself forward. A good shop is all about projects and timelines and execution. Nobody's excited about that, right? Well, except for the people that are impacted by the project. But right. You can't go to the wider university and your president and say, hey, I have this big project that is coming up. I need your support. No. Use storytelling frameworks, and we use the storytelling framework, which is university is on a path. And how can I help this university, the hero's journey? So the heroes are your faculty and your researchers and your administrators and your president. How can I help them on that journey? So I think that's number one. Number two. Number three, move from being just project management focused to culture building, right? You need a culture of innovation, a culture of agility. And that's a change. That's why I said a lot of this is personal change, right? Because
that's people change. Yeah.
It's people change. Right. Exactly. The fourth one, I would say, start taking some calculated risks, right? Start thinking outside of the box, start experimenting with some projects here and there in certain departments and certain faculties, et cetera. Because don't forget, this CIO has been rewarded for steady Eddie, stable, predictable,
Right.
things work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think number 5, that's why I keep on saying this is a personal project, first and foremost. Start developing emotional agility and resilience. Because once you start changing as a leader, as a CIO, I just start rethinking, what kind of leader do I need to be to move my organization into a different direction? There is going to be obstacles like pushback and friction and people not necessarily understanding what it is you're trying to do and maybe not being happy about it because Joe, I just want you to be Joe. I don't want you to be innovative, Joe, right? So you got to be resilient and you have to be agile in that sense. So there's some things you can do. Number one, and we talk about this all the time, you develop this framework, the entrepreneurial DNA, the bossy. Take that, get insight into how you stand in this entrepreneurial ecosystem. What kind of entrepreneur are you, or intrapreneur in this sense, right? What kind of personality do you have? Are you an innovator? Are you a specialist? And if you really are a specialist that likes to work with the nitty gritty and all of that, but you need to move to an innovator mindset, how do you do that? Is that even possible? Should you bring someone else in? Could you elevate somebody within your organization that has more of that innovator DNA, and they're just chomping at the bits?
Right.
And perhaps get a leadership coach, right? Go outside of your organization, find another CIO or another leader of some sort, of some stripe, and ask them, how would you go around this, about this, or have you done this, and how did you do this, etc. So I think that's the 5 mindset shifts I think that need to happen for someone to move a stable organization, a great organization, nothing wrong with it, but positioning them for future and growth.
Run us through those 5 one more time. And then my question for you is, as you look at those and you run through them, which ones will I, as the leader, likely struggle with the most? Which is probably the heaviest lift? And then we can talk a couple minutes about some guidance and advice on getting past any obstacles there. But run us through the list real quick.
Yeah. So number 1, think like a futurist, but act like an entrepreneur. Okay. Number 2, become good at storytelling and creating a vision as opposed to project management discussions. 3, start taking calculated risks. The 4th one is not only build on project management expertise, professionalism, but start working on culture, on change. And number 5, develop personal emotional agility and resilience. I think those are the 5, not necessarily in the same order, but those are the 5.
So with that in mind, as you think about many of your friends who are now deputies and CIOs and leading enrollment somewhere or leading whatever, financial aid somewhere, right? They're all in leadership roles. And I think that this advice you're giving it's cross utility across the institution. Sure. We're just using CIOs in this case as the example. Where in higher ed which one of these would be the heaviest lift or face the most obstacles, either internal to me or external in the organization?
I think all of these kind of come together. They're kind of a package. They do, right? Yeah. So I think the biggest friction is going to come from the people that are impacted by the new you the most, which is your direct stakeholders that you work with every day. Like, for example, the CFO, for example, head of HR or payroll or financial aid, etc. Which are these heavy transactional areas where things always require a lot of work and things can go wrong and it's tedious and it's important.
The financial aid leader may not want you wandering off becoming too innovative because they need you to do the block and tackle of keeping their systems alive and running well, right? So how do you, in this case, this is where that storytelling, visioning probably comes in. How do you invest time with them, cast a vision of the impact and benefit to them, and then bring them along in the journey, do some small experiments, get them some small wins?
Yeah.
I'm almost thinking, I can see some of your advice being directed towards the highest impact areas initially. Like, can you get a couple wins for the president? Can you get a couple wins for financial aid? Can you get a couple wins that impacts enrollment? Because then while you're elevating yourself, you're being elevated in the institution, I think, as a leader everyone should be paying attention to.
But I would also say, Joe, as part of this process, you need to start widening your vision and widening your areas of stakeholders. And I've said this on previous podcasts. One of the challenges with a lot of CIOs and senior leaders is that their direct stakeholders that they deal with on a daily basis are very important and very significant and very politically powerful, that consumes 120% of your time to keep them satisfied. But there are layers and layers of innovation and people that you can work with and ideas that are floating around in the university that don't have an ability to bubble to the top. And I think as part of this exercise is, start finding those clusters of innovation, those clusters of energy, within the college, wherever they might be, right? So we go back to one of the other things that we spoke about last time, which is, do a walking tour, do a listening tour, right? Walk the halls.
I couldn't agree more. Because as you're describing that, what popped in my mind is one of the schools we're working at. I don't think the CIO even knows that there's this guy who's a little kind of a tech geek in a completely different department. And he started to build some little tools to help this dean and that student dean and help them get data faster, help them visualize some things. And then one dean talked to another dean who talked to another dean. And now they've all come to this one guy. And he's built some really cool tools that really help these student deans get their job done, right? But the CIO doesn't know that there's this pocket of innovation here. And if they did take themselves out of that 120 working for the squeaky wheel thing and walk around, like you said, that could be game changing for the institution if IT could kind of support that and maybe even take it over and figure out how to scale it with better technology, because this thing is cobbled together with like shoestrings and, toothpicks. Good point. It's very real. Your point you brought up is very real. I could think of example after example.
Yeah. And
at one school, if you remember in Wisconsin, looked at it, there was over 800 shadow systems running at the institution, right? That means IT has no touch on it. That's, listening.
And by the way, an Excel spreadsheet can be, that feeds a
shadow
system.
Yeah.
Exactly. But what I was going to say, Joe, one of the final points is that I put number 5, which is really you start developing your personal brand and your agility and your emotional resilience. The reason why I put it at 5, but it really should be number 1. Because it's going to be some hard conversations and hard encounters with individuals that don't like you to change, right?
Right.
And this is especially relevant for, and we see this a lot. Let's say you work in a system and you were a campus IT administrator, for example, right? Or CIO, whatever the title is. Now you get elevated to a central role, but you're a known entity. It's a mind shift. It's a different way of interaction with the organization. And interestingly, it'll be a different way of interacting with the person that probably elevated you. Because the person elevated you believes in you, and because they believe in you on what you've done. But now here you are, it's like, this is what I've done, but I have all these new ideas. So there's going to be renegotiation, a little bit of relationships, both up and down.
Yeah, like as I kind of summarize what I learned from you today, it's almost like the leader there has to be a reason to change anything, right? So there has to be a why. So what's the why behind leaving the status quo, block and tackle? But then, like you had suggested, take a look at the trends, take a look at what's coming and see if any of those things inspire you, whether it's AI or changing demographics or whatever it may be, enrollment trends, whatever. Something should catch your attention, inspire you to go, I think I want to solve for that at our institution. But then you got to craft this vision, right? You got to have a picture in your mind that you then convert to a story that you could tell people of here's where we're going, here's how we're going to get there, here's how you're going to be involved, here's how I can be involved. And so they can kind of see the movie playing in their mind of how success happens. That's that engagement of the constituents. And you're saying, don't just be stuck on your constituents of today, cast a wider net. Across the institution, there's some pretty good constituencies out there that you may not even know about. Get those small wins, and then let that build momentum into basically rebranding you. What's going to rebrand me as a leader is the outcomes I'm delivering that are different than the outcomes I was delivering. So this journey positions me to be branded as the go-to guy, the go-to gal who's starting to make some things happen that are really interesting.
And unfortunately, it's not an either or, it's an and. So all the things that you're there for, right?
Plus, yeah.
The plus, it's plus, right? And that's basically a challenge. And I always say that, look, most IT departments are over allocated at 120%. So the trick is going to be, how do you do these things while doing all the things that you're supposed to do? The short answer for that, Joe, it's a very simple answer, but it seems to be very hard. It's called leadership. You have to lead. Your job is to lead. So your job is not to keep everybody happy. Your job is to lead. And leadership means making decisions. That's number one what it's about. Make a decision and stand by your decisions.
And a couple of weeks ago, I had a Mondays with Matt session, and he talked about uncomfortable conversations. So it's leading and then being willing to have some uncomfortable conversations along the way to get to the outcome, because otherwise everything stays status quo. Awesome. This is good. I think timing is good. Beginning of the year, people are thinking about some of this stuff. Certainly as, schools start preparing their strategic plans or thinking about the next academic year, all our leaders are starting to think about, is it just a rinse and repeat of last year, or am I going to do something different this year? So you've given us some good fodder and a great framework to think through. And as always, reach out to Fred, pick his brain, hop on a call with him. He's not going to send you a bill. See you all next time.